Hey, my name is Jay Melone. I'm the principal facilitator here at New Haircut. I'm kicking off this series called Q&A with Jay because it rhymes, but also because I'm hoping to answer some really important questions that come up over and over again about design thinking, design sprints, problem framing, facilitation, product design and development. And what I'll do is any of these questions that I hear over and over again, I'm going to spend a couple minutes answering them inside of videos just like this. Wherever you're watching these videos, if you'd like to ask a question and get it submitted for the series, just reply in the comments and we'll take a look and we'll see if we can get it queued up for an upcoming talk. Otherwise, I hope that you enjoy today's talk where I'm going to answer the question, when should you run a design sprint? Okay, so today's question is, when should we run a design sprint? If you're new to sprints, you should totally stop and Google design sprint and read up on it. There's lots of information out there on it. My short answer to what it is I call it an innovation framework. It's this highly structured recipe that borrows a lot of the principles from design thinking. And specifically what a design sprint aims to do is to get a group of people in a space to understand a problem that they're trying to solve, bring some different ideas together, turn that into a prototype that you then test with your target user or target market at the end of the sprint. And these things happen in 3, 4, 5 days or so really rapid innovation and ideation. And so the question becomes, when should we run a design sprint? And this question is probably more applicable to a bigger company, a team that's working in a corporate or enterprise environment. Because if you think about it, Google Ventures popularized design sprints, and the majority of the sprints that they were running were with startups and smaller companies. And they have that sort of advantage over an enterprise team where they get to focus on a single problem that they're really trying to work on. And so when you bring design sprints as a framework into these larger organizations that have dozens of projects and visions and themes of things that they're trying to get done, the question is totally valid. What should we take from our backlog, from our roadmap to run a design sprint on? And the instructions on that are a little fuzzy. If you kind of like follow the textbook definition, you should run design sprints on things that are big and bold. But there's not enough meat there. There's not enough definition of when you should run a sprint. And so the problem with that is if you organize people to come into a space, especially if you're putting people on planes and booking hotel, if you get everybody into this space to solve a problem and there's ambiguity on what the challenge is and who you have in the room to have that conversation, then you could be wasting a lot of people's time. And that starts sprints off totally on the wrong foot. So there's this notion, of course, of what should you do before the sprint so you can figure out if we should be running a sprint on this to begin with. And with a little bit of muscle memory that builds up, you'll get familiar with what you should and should not run sprints. But if you're kind of getting started, or if you're pitching sprints to stakeholders and VPs, and you're trying to frame up what you should run your sprints on, then doing a little bit of homework before the sprint is really important. And so what I actually do to prepare for my sprints is I run a 1 day or so framework called problem framing. And so problem framing isn't something that we invented inside New Haircut. We did develop a recipe of our own using design thinking that we think is really good at bringing the team together to align on one important problem that they want to articulate, get sort of like ruffle the feathers and make sure that there's agreement on who's being impacted by the problem and if it's important, and then really clearly articulate what that challenge is all about so that you have not only permission and sort of confidence to run a design sprint on it, but you know the right people that you should organize and bring into the sprint. And so to answer the question then, when should we run a design sprint? Basically, the short answer is after you've taken it through a problem framing workshop. And in problem framing, you're thinking really about two constituents. The first was you're looking at the screen here. The first is the company itself. So you're getting really clear. You're starting with a landscape of opportunities or problems or challenges. Those can be used interchangeably, right? You're thinking about this landscape of potential problems, things in your roadmap that you want to bring to the conversation. And then you use this prioritization process to whittle it down to one top opportunity, right? So you go from many to one, and then you think about the company and you bring the context of the company into the conversation. Because if you don't have a connection between the problem that you're working on and the vision that the company has set out, then there's friction between that. And that's when you get stakeholders and executives coming in and stopping the work that you're doing. So you think about the context of the company, then you bring in the voice of the human being that's being impacted by the problem that you would like to work on. And you bring a lot of this sort of user-centered conversation to it. And then what happens is, because you've thought about the company and you have this top problem, and now you've brought in sort of voice of the customer, there's this interesting dynamic that happens between opportunities that are exciting to the company and that are currently causing a lot of pain and frustration for the people experiencing those problems. And as it turns out, that's a perfect opportunity to improve that experience or altogether innovate. And that makes for a perfect thing to take into a design sprint. If you'd like to know more about problem framing as a practice, we've developed a toolkit that you can use to run problem framing as a workshop with your teams. The toolkit is totally do-it-yourself. There's lots of instructional videos in there. There's all of our tools and templates that you can open up and use. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I hope this answers your question and gets you a little bit more comfortable about what you should and should not run sprints on. Stick around for the next talk that's coming up in a week or so, where we're going to answer our next question as part of this series that's called Q&A with Jay. Take care.